Hey everybody, welcome to another theory webinar. This one's going to focus on two of the regional IGPs of France, which seems crazy that we're going to be able to do two in a single webinar, but and especially considering one is the largest wine growing region in France. But I think when it comes to fine wine and the things that we need to know, we can compartmentalize it pretty quickly and break it down. So we're going to take a look today at the Mediterranee and Pays d'Oc IGPs, which if you look here, Mediterranee covers Provence. We're not going to look at Rhone today. We're going to look at just Provence and Corsica. Rhone will get its own presentation, as you might imagine. And then we'll look at the Pays d'Oc, which is Languedoc and Roussillon here to the east. Cool. This map of Provence, we're going to just show it to you right again on the next slide. The major subregions here are AOCs from the west to the east. You could see Le Beau de Provence is this sort of purple area. Let's even zoom in real quick. Then you have Côte d'Ion Provence here, little gray area. The red little dots, this is Palette. It's tiny. It's split around the Arc River, and 80% of the production here is for Chateau Simone. You've also got Cassis here on the coast, Bandol, which I think some of us are familiar with, Pierrevert here in the north. Côte de Verrois is this sort of yellow-green area. Perhaps the most important, the Côte de Provence, which is all the darker green. Don't forget this little area in Var for Côte de Provence, and then Belette. I also put next to all of the AOCs the year that they were initiated, followed by the year they were updated. You can see all of the updates that came in 2011. Côte de Provence is important to note, 75% of the AOC's production is rosé. Within the Côte de Provence, you have 4 sub-regions. This map is pretty good at showing it. I'll see if I can point it out for you real quick. Saint Victoire here, right? Remember, Côte de Verrois splits the Côte de Provence. You've also got Pierrefitte here, Lalande on the coast, and this is famous for being the only sub-region that also allows for white wine. You can grow Vermentino here too, in addition to your reds and rosés, and then Fréjus here in the northeast. Cool. In general, the history of the region, this is the birthplace of French wine. This is where the Greeks brought wine to Marseille in about 600 BCE. The only region outside of Bordeaux that classifies Grand Crus, and this was done in 1955. Originally, there were 23. Today, there are now just 18. Some of them have gone bankrupt or shuttered. Different things have occurred. A few that I want to point out that are important: Clos-Cibon, Domaine de Rimeresque, Clos-Morel, which is part of Domaine Haut, along with Château de Celle, and then Domaine du Jas d'Esclans. Of course, look, it's dry, warm, and it's a Mediterranean climate. Imagine that. The northern portion, though, is actually affected somewhat by the Le Mistral winds you'll see in the Rhone. You also have the Black Mountains, the Mediterranean Sea, of course, and that little Arc River that we mentioned, splitting Palette. Le Beau de Provence was originally a sub-region of Côte d'Ion Provence. It was upgraded because it's a warm hilltop area protected from that Le Mistral. Soil types, a lot of limestone. Palette, you should know, though, it gets a little more chalk and silica in the northeast. And then traditionally, it's GSM and Cinsault driven blends. Some that stand out aside from that, though, in Côte de Provence, you'll find Tibaran, sort of an ancient variety. We'll talk about Clos-Cibon a little bit more here in just a minute. They're famous for resurrecting that variety. In Bandol, you are Clairette driven for whites, and then Mourvedre driven for reds and rosés. Palette, white, Vermentino. Reds and rosés allow for Braquette and Fuela Nara. In Pierrevert, you'll find Grenache Blanc and Vermentino. Cassis is driven by Marsanne, Clairette, Doucillon Blanc, and then Côte Verrois allows for Semillon and Uni Blanc. So just a few things that sort of stand out around the region. Normally, I like to build these little boxes that you can look at sort of on an X and Y axis and think about, you know, what wine styles are allowed in each region. This one's a little bit difficult to fit into things when it comes to that. So you're looking at a lot of different outliers here. Vinification techniques, the rosés have to be 2 or more varieties blended together via the saignage method. And then, of course, Bandol Rouge spends 18 months in oak. Some terminology you'll find: the skittle bottle. This is the traditional fish-shaped bottle you'll see here, used in the region. And then in Bandol, the terraces there are known as restank. And you'll find that on bottlings of, I think it's on Chateau Pradot. Things that I want to point out, since the area is known for rosé, I wanted to speak to some of the best rosés produced in the region. And those are known as the Rosé de Garde. You can go outside of Provence to find Rosé de Garde for sure. You can find, Lopez de Heredia, of course, makes famous rosé. But most of them come from this area. So we're going to start with Clos Cibon. As we mentioned, it's not really in Lalande. It's right outside of Lalande. It's right close to it. For their Tiberine bottling at Côte de Provence, this is the Tiberine grape with just a touch of others in order to meet the requirements of 2 grapes being blended. These are actually aged under fleurette during certain vintages, which is super cool. They're fermented in stainless steel. They're moved to 500-liter foeders for élevage. They also produce the Cuvée Spéciale de Vignette from 60-year-old vines. And you have that very unique garrigue-like flavor that you hear about quite often in the area. Château d'Esclans Rosé de Garde is known as Garris. This is 80-year-old Grenache and roll. There's no maceration. It goes straight into new or once used demi-muids that actually have cooling coils inserted that regulate the temperature. There's twice weekly batonnage, creating a very reductive environment. You have to remember that Grenache is very sensitive to oxygen. And like in Champagne, the lees reduce the color here. Your first vintage was 06, owned by Sacha Lechine, and very commonly it is compared to white Burgundy. Domaine Tempier in Bandol, established in 1834. Mostly this is fruit from younger vines harvested a week before their reds. Mourvedre provides that thicker skin with more anthocyanin and a naturally more reductive grape. The blend here is typically 55 Mourvedre, 25 Grenache, and 20 Cinsault. The later ripening means that you have lower yields. And this started as a marriage of Lucie Tempier to Lucien Perraud, which led to the pioneering of Mourvedre and the petitioning of the INAO for the AOC that was established in 1941 for Bandol. It does spend 8 months in concrete vats. Château Simon in Paulette, right, I guess, straddling the Arc River. This is from the Rougier family since 1830. It's northeastern facing slopes, allowing for a longer growing season on the slope of Massif du Montaigu. Grenache driven with a little Mourvedre and Cinsault. It's supplemented with a handful of other grapes. These are partially destemmed and vinified with indigenous yeasts. Then the Saunier juice is blended back into the wine, which is matured in small oak casks. So producer is very important in the region, right? Clos Cibon for Côte de Provence. In Bandol, you should know Domaine Tempier, Château de Pierrenon, and Château Pradot. In Palette, of course, Château Simon, that's 80% of the production. In Côte de Verrois, despite the fact that they use Vin de Paille, Domaine de Trient is there. And another that uses Vin de Paille and Le Beau de Provence is Domaine de Trevelin. The reason being that they prefer to use Bordelais varieties, and the AOC for Le Beau de Provence requires Mediterranean varieties. Off the coast, you'll find Corsica, this interesting island, this sort of French, sort of Italian. You do see the Sangiovese grape here, known locally as Neoluccio, along with Schiacarello, Grenache, and Barbarossa. Whites here are Vermentino and Uni Blanc. There are 4 AOPs. The Vin du Corse, which is this sort of green, lighter green area. Muscat du Cap Corse, which is all of it, but for port-style Vin du Natural wines made with the white Muscat grape. Patrimonio, which is this little orangish area. It makes Vermentino and Sangiovese. And then Ajaccio on the western coast that makes Schiacarello and Vermentino. Great producers of the area, you'll find Comte Abatucci, Antoine Arena, and Claude Canarelli. Corsica is a single note card, right? You can get pretty much everything you need to know there. Languedoc-Roussillon, as we move to the Pays d'Oc, is not a single note card. This map is overwhelming when you take a look at it. What do you need to know? I mean, there's so much here to take a look at. Well, with Languedoc-Roussillon, Languedoc produces about 90% of the wines here, 10% from Roussillon, and there's a sea of Vin de Paille wine. There's been a shift in focus to more quality-driven wines recently, and there's definitely some marketing behind it. They're really trying to push that, well, you know, they're naturally organic, use a lot of buzzwords. But you are seeing some better quality wines for sure. There's 650,000 acres. It's the largest wine region in France by both area and production. 13.5 million hectoliters produced, which means about 150 million cases of wine. So there's a ton. Well, there's a lot more than a ton. Tons and tons. The region Languedoc gets its name from the Languedoc, or the language of Occitania. And this was a language that was local to the area years ago and predates the French language. And you'll still hear some people use it as a second language between, you know, Spanish and French in the region. There's also the CIVL and the CIVR organizations for both Languedoc and Roussillon. Climate and geography, look, it's hot, it's sunny, and there's almost no rainfall. You get the tramontane winds that come in from the northwest. They're a slightly gentler version of Les Mistral, though they're still pretty violent. They're dry and cold. And then you get the Marin winds that come from the southeast off the Gulf of Lyon that are moist and warm Gulf winds, right? So we look at the Languedoc and we think there's a ton of different AOPs here. How do I learn them? I'm going to help you out here. We're going to break them down into 5 main zones. The mountain zone, which is continental, and it really resembles the Rhone. The coastal zone, more Mediterranean influence. You get more sunshine, very lush wines, including 3 of the 4 VDN fortified wines of the region. The south region, which is the closest to Roussillon, the largest amount of Carignan. The center region, sort of the heart of it all. And then the western, which is sort of a mixture of continental and Atlantic influences. And there's some sparkling wines down here in Limo. We're going to start there in the western zone. And I like to give you these little boxes so you can think of things on an X and Y axis, so to speak, of wine styles that are permitted in the region. Here you can make red wines from Cabarde, Malpère, or Limoux, all 3 regions. Cabarde is GSM with Bordeaux. Malpère is Merlot and Cabernet Franc, and Limoux is Merlot driven. Rosés can come from Cabarde and Malpère. Whites can only come from Limoux. They're Chard, Chenin Blanc, and Malzac, and they have to be fermented in oak. It's the only region in France that requires that. Then sparkling wines all come from Limoux. There are 3 different styles. There's the Crémant de Limoux, which is Chard, Chenin Blanc, and a little bit of Malzac. There's Limoux Method Ancestral, where the wine's fermentation halts during the cool winters and then kicks back up in the spring. And then there's Blanquet de Limoux, which is a very unique style. It's Method Traditionnel, but it is 90% Malzac. And it's the oldest intentionally sparkling wine AOP, or wine area in all of France. The central zone here, you can take a look. You'll find Le Clop, Picpoul to Pinay, and those are your most important. The rest of it plays out into sweet wines on the coast. For red wines, Le Clop down here, very lush GSMs. For white wines, you can do Le Clop as well, Bourboulon based, or Picpoul de Pinay, which is only white. And then your sweet wines, you've got Muscat de Frontignan, which is the oldest and largest of the VDN regions or port styles. Muscat de Frontignan also allows for vin de liqueur, in which about 10 to 15% of the must is fortified prior to fermentation. In Muscat de Lunel, you also have the Muscat de Noël process that you can utilize, in which the wines are bottled on December 1st of the year that they're harvested. And then you get Muscat de Miraval. The southern zone of the Languedoc, here you'll find Fitou and Corbière. For red wines, you got Fitou, Corbière, and then the Corbière Boutinac. And then rosé is Corbière, and white wines from Corbière too. Fitou is driven by Grenache. Corbière and Boutinac are driven by Carignan. There's a heavy dose of Grenache and Fitou. The central zones of Languedoc, you'll find here Minervois, including the cru of La Livinière, and then Saint-Chinian with their crus of Berlou and Roquebrune, and then you've got the one suite of Saint-Jean de Minervois Red wines can be basically all of them, although it should be noted that the three cru of La Livinière, Minervois, Saint-Genien Roquebrune, and Saint-Genien Berlou are all rouge only. And for Berlou, it requires agrapage, which means destemming. These are 100% destemmed. You can make a rosé from Minervois or Saint-Genien as well as white. But then again, that sweet wine, AOC of Saint-Jean de Minervois, these are, again, port-style wines made from Muscat. You could also do that Muscat Noel here, too. And then you get the mountain zone. This is just north of the coastal area. You could see, this map isn't great for blowing up, but Fougères, Terrazas du Larzac, Pic Saint-Loup. Fougères produces wines of red, white, and rosé. Terrazas du Larzac is white, red only, and Pic Saint-Loup is red and rosé. As we get further south into the Roussillon, there's a lot of vin du naturel to talk about here. You need to talk about Rivesaltes, you need to talk about Bagnols, you need to talk about Maury. Those wines are, you can see more about them in the fortified wine presentation that was done about a week ago. So if you haven't seen that yet, I would certainly say I'm not going to give you the same information in this presentation as I did you a week ago. Outside of those fortified wines, unfortified wines of Bagnols are released as Couleur. Maury allows for dry wines too, and then the Côte de Roussillon Village allows for 32 communes north of Les Osprey Mountains. There are 4 communes that can append: the La Tour de France, Carameny, Lescared, and Tatouvel. That's my presentation for this week. That is the best way that I can find to help break down 2 major IGP in a pretty quick way, and that you can look at Mediterranee and the Pays d'Oc just like that. So I hope to see you again next week. Cheers, everybody.